Hi, I'm Lee Kirby, Chairman and co-founder of Salute Mission Critical, and I thank you for attending this conference today. We're going to go through a case study format for what I believe is the key to our success, and that was a sound workforce development strategy. Beyond that, you'll hear some underlying themes that are also quite interesting around commercial success and social responsibility. And what I hope that you take away from this conference today are lessons learned that we experienced that you can apply to your business and be able to help the industry solve the personnel shortage, because the talent shortage is beginning to affect us in many ways. The story really starts back in 2012 when I was retiring from 36 years of military service. I had had a pretty extraordinary career that unconventional, to say the least. I started out active duty, did my 4 years. I enlisted in 1976, got out and went into the reserves, and in 1982 got my commission. Things were tooling along, and then with the invasion of Haiti, I was called up in the mid-90s onto active duty, rolled from that back into the reserves, and after 9/11 ended up being called up 6 more times. So I had about 10 and a half years active duty and the rest reserve time. This gave me an extraordinary insight into both transitioning from active duty and the hardships of serving as reservists and guardsmen in a fast-paced environment where you're deploying quite a bit. So what I wanted to do was continue serving, and me and my co-founder, Jason Oakroy, got together and came up with the idea that we could help solve the data center shortage of talent and build a company that hired veterans and addressed the veteran unemployment issue. In 2012, prior enlisteds that had done their term and probably a couple tours in the desert were suffering more than a 20% unemployment problem. They were considered unskilled and they were standing in line looking for jobs. We didn't think that made sense. We wanted to fix that or help fix it. And those that weren't looking for jobs, many we found were moving furniture, making sandwiches, making coffee, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But in this data center industry, I think there's so much more that you can do and so much more fulfilling work that veterans could apply to. So we saw the opportunity to solve two problems: veteran unemployment and the talent shortage in the industry. And when you first hear that, much like the iceberg, when you first see it, you think that's all that it is, but there's a lot of detail behind that. What is the veteran and what veteran pool are we talking about and what talent to go after? It's a target-rich environment, and as you get down into the details, you'll find that there's a lot of things to learn from. The data center market was our career path. I'd been in it 20 years. My co-founder had been in it many years. We wanted to have an impact, so we needed to go to what we knew, and that was data centers. The great thing about this market is the scope is enormous. It goes from the physical to the logical environments, whether you're doing mechanical, electrical work, or getting into the networks or the application development and DevOps and everything else. It's all there. The pace of change is incredible, as well as the growth. And you put all of that together and you've got tons of opportunities. The talent shortage has been around for a while, and with it being more than 10 years that I've been writing and talking about this, I believe that the industry as a whole is recognizing it, and the impacts are starting to be recognizable too, as I've seen incident reports that point to a lack of personnel in the data center as to the root cause of why an incident became an outage. And it's a cascading of events from lack of personnel caused overtime caused repositioning of what they would have normally done in training and drills. The wrong person was assigned just because of lack of people available, and ultimately the incident became an outage. And that's something that we need to be cognizant of and look to resolve with these type of programs. The way that we solve this, I think, can be applied to your company as well. You find a market where you believe you can get resources trained and placed into the gap. For us, our background was data center operations. So we ultimately chose remote hands, and we'll go into that in more detail. It may be that you're a cyber technologist and that's the strength of your company, or application development, or whatever it is. If you work from the market backward, where there's a demand, where you need the resources, you can get the program in place, get the training programs in place and the professional development programs in place, and look at this as a workforce issue that you need to continuously move and develop over time. I believe it's solvable, but it has to be based on demand. So defining what those demands are, what the job recs are, getting those job recs into the training program, and then ultimately finding the resource pool that will feed this, so that in your recruiting and your selection, you're picking the right resources from a good resource pool. We, with my veteran background, chose the military industry, but it could be pharmaceutical industry, it could be anything based on what your needs are. But the hidden value of the veteran resource pool goes far beyond what people realize. We've got over 200,000 veterans a year coming into the workforce. We've got almost 1 million, 800,000 plus reserves and guard that are available. All of those folks represent an opportunity to find qualified candidates who have had thousands of dollars poured into them in training around leadership and communication and critical thinking. The problem-solving strength of veterans who have worked in austere and many times combat environments is incredible, because they'll focus on the problem, determine what the alternatives are, make a hasty decision if need be, or make a thoughtful decision at the pace that's needed to support the business, and implement that and look for feedback along the way. That kind of disciplined thinking without the emotions and trying to focus on the problem and understanding what the real problem is makes the veteran resource pool, I think, extremely valuable. There's a little bit of confusion around veterans. If you look in the data center industry, it's populated by a lot of veterans, but it's only one small portion of the veteran pool. We as the data center industry always talk about Navy nukes, and it's an affectionate term for the people that came out of the Navy that have been working in the nuclear power generation and have very disciplined procedures, had a ton of training put into them, and they're very valuable. They can walk across, as well as telecommunication experts and others in the military that have that expertise that can transfer straight across and can just be oriented to the new environment. Those are easy, and that's what most of the people look for. As you can see in this chart, 80% of companies are looking to hire those that can be transferred straight across. Another portion of the pie, which is the larger portion, are those that have related experience but need a little cross-training, sometimes a lot of cross-training, to be able to take the position, but a less number of people are looking at those. This could be psychological operations experts who you can get into your marketing department, water purification experts that you can get into your data center. There's a variety of mechanical and electrical maintenance goes on in the military that may be on aircraft, but that can be converted. Those are transferable, not transferable, those are cross-trainable skills. And then there's the combat arms ranks, the logistics support, the truck drivers, the cooks, and the infantry, which is, my background was infantry and then became civil affairs, so I have an affinity for the infantry and talk about them quite a bit. But if you look at an infantry person that is doing their job, everybody thinks about engaging with and killing the enemy. But that's just one part of their job. To do that, they've got to be able to maintain their weapon systems, their communication systems, their vehicle, just to be able to get around. They follow procedures to do that. And they do that on a regular basis, and it's timed and it's monitored, and the maintenance program is reported on. So they understand strong maintenance programs. They understand the life and death the requirement of that too, to have functioning weapon systems and communications gear. Take someone like that, all you have to do is teach them the new equipment. And that's what we've done at Salute. We can take the cook, the infantry, the truck driver, we can turn them into data center technicians because they were doing similar work. And it's that we've overlooked in this industry, is the whole pie. Instead of just a small percent of people being willing to train these that are considered unqualified and trainable, I think that this piece of the pie should be considered related experience. If you look past the specialty, whether it's an MOS or AFSC that they had, you look at past that rating and you decide, what were they doing in support of that specialty? Were they learning to follow procedures? Were they maintaining gear that I can teach them how to maintain something else? And that'll give you a much wider resource pool to pull from. So we ultimately decided on remote hands. Many reasons for that. There was a huge demand. There was not a dominant player. There were quality issues. There were timing issues, budget issues. As we queried the market and talked to friends and associates that we'd known for years in the industry, this is where we thought the opportunity would be. So we took advantage of the veteran resource pool, and we looked to have a great combination of people, process, and technology, because that would give us a sustainable solution to the market. When it came to process, we adapted what we considered a mindset of rigorous flexibility. And that's not an oxymoron. That's actually applicable, and I'll try to explain, is that we have our training division, we have our services delivery. We have the rigor that goes along with what we deliver on the services side, but we flex and move as technology changes, as time changes and markets change, and we put these in place. But anything that changes in service delivery is immediately fed back into the training program so that they're in sync, so that any new candidates coming out of training are dropped into services roles with the latest and greatest procedures, having been trained, and now they're just putting them to use. With that, we adapted a means of assessing candidates that were coming in, so that an infantry person may start at ground zero and go through the entire training process, whereas a helicopter mechanic may already have a lot of knowledge that is applicable and can jump the process by a week or a month. And we get them further in the process. They don't get bored, they get out to the field quicker. And then they get assigned to their mentor, and they start doing projects and getting the hands-on experience. From a technology point of view, we needed to go with the concept of transparent efficiency. And by that, we knew that anything we needed to know, our clients needed to know. And many times those clients had clients or tenants that needed to know that information. So we built our systems to be open. In the first year or two, the systems were not in place. We were using spreadsheets and paper like everybody does. But we did these as a homegrown thing to be able to track time effectively, both from accounting, but also project time, so that we could control budgets. And we needed systems that would give us proof of workmanship, because our work was going to be in remote locations, and we needed to be able to share data timely. And all of the tools are in place to be able to do that. And we'll go into that in more detail in following slides. We did consider alternatives besides remote hands, and went through probably 6 to 12 months of trying different things and wondering if the model would work. At first, we thought we'd go down the nonprofit route and get grants and train, but it became obvious that if you don't have experience with the training, you're going to struggle getting started in the data center industry. So we needed a model where we could recruit, train, get them the experience, and if they stay with us forever, that's great. But if they take jobs with our clients, that's success too. And that's another different part of our model. We looked at traditional staffing models, and there's some great companies out there that do that, but that relies on those transferable skills. We didn't want to get into that, or recruiting of transferable skills, because that's already being done. We looked at the traditional functional model that typically on a data center site, you'll see at least 3 vendors, one for security, one for the critical environments, the mechanical and electrical, and one for the IT, the raised floor space. What we came up with was a model that consolidated all 3 of these functions, and in doing so, did not introduce any other risks, but did introduce the fact that there was an overabundance of personnel at the site. We were able to cut down on the number of people required to be at the site. That worked to reduce operational expense. The model came in highly competitive on pricing, and with our training to back it up and to show that we had the multi-skilled operators that could accomplish these tasks. And you'll see in the growth of the company when we get into later that that was a real winner from coming up with a model, because our system, our capitalist system, requires you to come up with something to the market that is more attractive than what's already there, or different and more attractive. We also looked at the dispatch support model and did not go that route, because to get a fleet and to have the windshield time, to have the personnel ready to dispatch in the global command center was beyond our capabilities, our personal finances. Because we did bootstrap this, we put that on the, we'll look at this later. And now we find ourselves 8 years later looking at it, because We do have the critical mass, we have the global command center in place, and we're now starting to dispatch techs around the world to be able to support our clients. We're seeing the advent of the edge computing really driving a lot of this, with edge data centers out there that are unmanned, needing to have techs on a regular and on a call-out basis, and we're able to fulfill that. But in the beginning, we went with the remote hands solution because the remote hands solution also gave us all of the technical skills it would require if we ever did go to the dispatch model. And that's worked out very well for us. The kind of strategic approach we used in this was to start with the market and do backwards planning as to how we would fill that need. And as we filled it, we took a crawl, walk, run approach because we were entrepreneurs. We needed to build it, prove it, and then build more and prove that. So we built it with the simplest of tasks in the data centers that get put out to bid for people to do. We were able to win those projects, learn from them, make those processes rock solid, and then move on to the next task and win more projects, eventually moving into operations because we had taken it all on a project basis. And with the operations role, we could do it on an ongoing basis. And that worked incredibly well for us. With that backwards planning, we developed an integrated training program, like I mentioned earlier. And the key to that was that we had candidates that could come in at any point in the cycle because you have different levels of skills and experience. You may find an infantry person that comes to you that's been doing a lot of education on the side and working on computers and doing things that accelerate them far past where you think. So having the assessment test, not just an interview, but the assessment test, gave us the ability to interject them into the training cycle at the most appropriate point. Helps us from a cash flow point of view, helps them from an attention and not getting bored point of view. And then we roll them out from that initial training into more advanced training with a mentor. They get their hands on, and then they roll into continuous development and training to be able to master not only their skills, but those skills of their teammates, their boss, and their boss's boss. The other key value of this is that we saw early on that we needed to have the training totally integrated with services. And that was operational efficiency because we didn't want to have to be retraining when they hit the field. So when they hit the field, they're able to hit the field running and start getting the hands-on experience. And that kind of entrepreneur bootstrap mindset, I think, helped us develop this in a very cost-efficient way. There are ways to do this if you're a large corporation and have the budget capability to plan it out and not do it incrementally. And if you can do that, it's far easier and it may even save some money, but I'm not so sure on that because the incremental approach gave us a chance to very quickly get things to market, learn, revamp, and then continue that process of getting things to market, improving them, and continuously moving down the line. So I would encourage you to look at both approaches, not because you may have all the money in the world and could do it Big Bang theory, but Big Bang also has big risks with it. An incremental approach has some value to it. The technologies we leveraged to do this, I kind of split into two groups. Our back office, we went with commercially available software or software as a service. We chose systems that we knew were reliable and worked and that we'd worked with in other companies. And that's how we got our HR, finance, and sales teams automated. Sales team was the last piece of automation that came with that, which is typical because we needed to get the accounting in place and the HR systems in place. But then we did follow along with that in year 3 or 4. Up until then, spreadsheets were the key. And the systems that we needed for our service delivery and our training, we knew we would not find in commercially available software, but in components that we could put together and develop around. So we got our training management system in place so that we can track what a person has after their assessment, how they're proceeding along through their training as they complete the different modules, what they've completed and what they've got hands-on experience with. And then as they get into the projects, the work and following the work and the workflow and the work breakdown structures as to what's completed. All of this is digitized. So our techs are in the field with their tablets and they're following the procedures, checking it off. And with the workforce enablement and the workforce management, that was the ability to show our quality of work. And with tablets and with those digitized procedures, we're able to take pictures of completed work that timestamps it for our client, who we usually have an SLA with because they usually have an SLA with their tenant. and they can use that to be able to show contractually that they've met their obligations, but also we can use it from a learning point of view as to how long it took us to do this and how we can do it faster next time. And then workforce management in general, as we're working with clients, one client, we're working in 120 countries deploying technology. Keeping track of who's where when can become quite onerous. But with this workforce management technology that we're just rolling out, we can geofence the data center and know when a tech arrives and when they depart. While they're there, we can see the activity that they're following on the tablet and see the procedures, and so can the client. And it gives us a lot of advantages with a global workforce. It also fortuitously helped us with contact tracing during the pandemic, because key elements of information when we're an essential workforce being able to cross borders and get the technology in place, we needed to have some way to show with responsibility that we're tracking the contacts that we're making and where we're going, so that if asked, we can provide that to government entities. The challenges we faced were numerous, but I think the challenges that you can learn the most from are all around the training program. Probably year one, we were not faking it to make it, but we were doing the best we could. We got better in year two, and by year three, I think we had mastered it. By about year three, we realized that we needed to have it broken out into more distinct modules, so that when we do the assessment, everybody will hit the kind of graduated curriculum where they best fit, but everybody goes through the Common Core. We make sure that we're all trained to the same safety standards, and we make sure that everybody understands the culture and values of Salute, why they're at Salute, why we're doing Salute, and why we interface with the clients the way we do. Everything has to be completely transparent. You have to be willing to have the tough conversations when you've screwed up, and you raise your hand. It's not waiting for somebody to find out, because the faster you get it out, the faster it can be resolved, and we can move on from it and learn from it. So we teach that Common Core to everybody. We interject you in the graduated curriculum program. And if you can start out with something like this, if you're looking at a full workforce development type solution to satisfy needs that you have in the market, this is one of the key things that I think has benefited us the most. The ongoing professional development cycle of this keeps things going, and if you have this system that you develop to be able to support this, you can track from the time a person is selected, goes through their training, to the time they actually do their exit interview, and see the flow of things. And you can also discover from that data how you can do things better. So we've got a training team that's constantly reviewing that data, trying to figure out if we're driving and supporting this in the way that we should. And the last and absolute most important part of this was tightly integrating it with operations, not letting either one of these work in a silo, so that anything that happens new, any new technology, any new procedure, any new protocol is immediately fed back to the training teams so that they can incorporate it and have people hit the ground running. As an entrepreneur, trying to figure out how to fund the training program was the tricky part. So we did the typical investment of time and got the modules together. We tested them out. We got onto the projects. We proved them out. Then we took what we learned from those projects to be able to get the curriculum developed over time. So it was incremental, and we past that initial investment, we depended on winning the projects to leapfrog that to do the next module to win that project. And it ended up to where we eventually got into what I call a balanced supply chain. And I'll get into those numbers in a minute. But we found the biggest thing from a commercial point of view as we were doing this and taking the message to the market actually applies whether you're doing this as a service provider or whether you're an internal organization that services your own company's business units. You need to ensure them and make sure in your messaging to them that they're not getting trainees into slots. We're very much like the military, and you will be too. You've got a certain percentage of your force that will be in training. You've got a certain percentage of them that will be leaving the company. And in between, you've got those that are fully deployable, and you send them to war, or in our case, you send them to the client site. And that's the workforce that they'll be getting. They can know about how you make the sausage, because there's goodness in that, and to see how that's integrated into operations. But you can't let them think that they're going to get trainees on site, because that's not what they're paying for. So we learned how to work that messaging correctly, but it also helped us set expectations too. And I think it grew in the value appreciation of what we were doing for the clients and for the resource pool we were capitalizing on. And as I was mentioning, the workforce development, I think we've achieved a balance that is needed for sustainable operations. We've hit critical mass. At any point in time, 10% of our employees are in initial training and mastering their skills. About 15% of them are moving from mastering their skills to mastering that of those around them so that they can be that multi-skilled operator. And by the time that they've gotten through that process, then they can be in the general pool of operations technicians that are on site with the data centers, or they can continue working the projects because some people actually like the finite nature of projects and moving on to a different site. So based on their career goals and objectives, at any point in time, we've got about 75 to 90% of our workforce are out delivering services, while 10% are getting the training that they need to be able to come in and be fully utilized. The thing that a lot of people didn't realize that I think is a great benefit to the industry as well is diversity and inclusion comes naturally when you look at our workforce. Our workforce recruits from prior enlisted ranks, high school degrees, people that work with their hands. This workforce is very diverse. At Salute, we have 30% of our workforce identify as white males. The rest would be in diversity categories. And so clients are finding out and even commenting now that not only do they get the advantage of a military discipline, of all the leadership training and critical thinking that the military gave to them, but they get the advantage of a diverse workforce that comes with a different perspective and a different history and a different background from different parts of the states and thinks differently. And those thinking differently means not only will you be able to innovate with new ways of solving problems, but innovate with new technologies or new procedures that you're going to put out into the market. And that diversity and inclusion is our strength. I'm very proud of it at Salute because we've proven, just like the military has proven, that it's all about inclusion. Include those, give everybody a chance to succeed, and they will. So we've been doing this since 2013, and it's gone 9 more countries than I thought it would. We're now in 10 countries operating data centers, and I expect in 2 or 3 years that'll be 15 or 20 because things are on a roll. The internet continues to grow, and people need reliable operating technicians on site, and that's the spot that we fill. We're currently at a little over 400 personnel, and we've introduced more than 2,000 veterans to the industry. And that's the proudest part of what we've done is that we've launched these careers and we've put this diverse and inclusive workforce into the industry that was before that not a feeder system and not a resource pool that was really being fully utilized. The other results that we've seen is the service model, and I believe that this has helped us commercially because we did come out with an offering that gave us the ability to reduce the site staff, and it improves the operational efficiency for our clients. It improves their operating structure. Their NOI will be much greater than it was if they work with us as to the traditional model. And our year-over-year sales and the word of mouth that goes out there, I think is having the right effect. And we're even seeing the competitive landscape change as others are starting to try to emulate this multi-skilled operator role and go out with a much more efficient model, which in some cases means it's I think it's called eating their current revenue stream, which means reducing their revenue stream, but it's all for the goodness, and they can free up resources to work on something else and innovate. The training that we integrated with operations was another key factor. We've seen it in our customer satisfaction reports, and we've seen it in the quality of service. And this ability to rapidly transition from the resource pool we chose, which was military, was set up specifically knowing that we didn't have to train them in problem solving and leadership. We needed to train them in the technical aspects of the job. And to me, that's far easier. And we know how to do that. So we coupled that with the military background, and we're able to roll to market with a very effective system. The lessons learned around this, I think, are key in that commercial success and social responsibility can go hand in hand. It's far more rewarding than just commercial success. And we've seen it here at Salute. We've seen the fact that when we look at the 400 plus that we have working for us and the 2,000 that have been introduced to the industry, 12% of those veterans were homeless when we hired them. Some were living in a car with their pregnant wife. Some were on the streets. We were able to give them a foot up. It was not a handout. It was just a hand. They got a job. They became self-sustaining, and they've been able to take care of it from there. So commercial success and social responsibility can work, but social responsibility alone, I don't believe stands much of a chance unless you figure out how to fund it. And maybe you're better at grants than I am, but the way to fund it is with commercial success. So it is the means to the end. The other key to our success is working backwards from the market. If there had not been a demand for remote hands, this would not have worked. We would have found something else. But using that in a key part of the workforce development to solve talent shortage, I think is developing those skills and having the training program, not just for initial training, but for ongoing professional development, so that you can keep that funnel going, keep the supply chain in place so that the resources are being fed into the market. This talent shortage in the industry isn't going to go away because of Salute or any one company. It's going to take all of us. And I think it's going to take many more people realizing that they've got to have effective transition and training programs, both from the military, but also from other industries. And if you're going to take advantage of either the military resources or other industries, whether it's pharmaceutical or manufacturing, you have to have a workforce development strategy in place. And that's the key learning point here, is that whether it's cyber technology or application development or operations management, it has to be a holistic approach to solving the talent problem. We've got it taken care of on remote hands. We need more taken care of in other areas of the OSI stack. And finally, I would be remiss without mentioning a new program that we started a couple years ago, and we've been recognized by the Military Friendly Programs for it, is our spouse employment. Military spouses are one of the most disadvantaged groups out there that you can think of, because they're having to move with their spouse every 2 or 3 years, and they're either, if they've got credentials, they got to re-credential in another state. Many times they lose their job and employment for a period. We are hoping to avoid that. If a spouse can work with us in California and has a job there for a couple of years, their spouse moves to the East Coast, we can move them to the East Coast and they still stay employed. This gives them continuity and a chance to move up through our ranks and get into the industry itself. Military spouses have not had the same training as veterans, but don't forget that they've gone through the same life experiences as them. I can't think of anybody that would be better at contingency planning or con ops than a military spouse, because every time I deployed, we had to sit down and get a family care program together. My wife was going to have to take over and know what to do for both of our functions, how to take care of the kids and get them to everything they needed, taking care of the household, and continuing on with a plan for continuing on if I did not return. Every military spouse has gone through this. So to be able to look at something without emotion, when it's very emotional, make the plans and get them in place and be able to execute, we turn spouses into project managers, into planners, and those that wanted and have the acumen into technicians. So I encourage you to look at the entire military community, veterans as the key, but as you look outside of the veterans, a veteran could not have done what they did without the support of their spouse and family. And I just wanted to put that pitch in there. Finally, you can get a hold of me at this email address. You see our URL there, but the most important thing is, one presentation probably doesn't do it all, but we've put together a playbook to help acquaint you to the steps that we go through to be able to solve the data center talent crisis. So you can go to our website, download that for free, and see how it applies to your situation, because it's different for everybody, but we think that there are common core around workforce development that you can use to your advantage, and hopefully use some of the mistakes that we did along the way and learn from to be able to accelerate your growth and solve the talent shortage for you. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to talking to you if you'd like to have more information.